What makes Revenge of the Sith good? Is it the visuals, the lightsaber fights, or the music, or is it something more? In my opinion, Revenge of the Sith's story is so interesting because it is the only Star Wars movie that is a tragedy, and because of that, it is the most emotional as well. From Anakin's turn itself, to the extermination of the Jedi, the slaughter of the younglings, and the immolation of Darth Vader's body. This Star Wars movie pushed past the boundaries of everything that came before it. However, there's one element of the film that is more tragic than all of these, and that combines everything I mentioned earlier, that being visuals, lightsaber fights, and music, and that is Anakin versus Obi-Wan. The tale of two brothers with the closest of bonds who were divided by the betrayal of one, Anakin, who took everything from the world of the second, Obi-Wan, leading to Obi-Wan needing to battle Anakin, which led to the loss of the one piece of his world left that Anakin had not taken from him, which was Anakin himself. This is the most perfectly tragic story of all time. This is the culmination of years of cinema and centuries of storytelling, leading to a culmination between two characters with fight choreography, which expertly shows the intimate bond between these two warriors, down to every strike they take at each other's life. A background which expresses the true beauty of the tragic downfall of brothers and fictional world, with a dark fiery volcano world which spews out vibrant orange lava, as the backdrop to the clash of the blue lightsabers which belong to former allied heroes, and music which portrays an epic level of importance to the history of this saga, with a tragic undertone only accomplishable from someone as masterful as the likes of John Williams. This is Anakin versus Obi-Wan. Isn't it poetic and tragic in and of itself that this movie, which is often criticized for its dialogue, is the same movie whose very dialogue makes it one of the greatest pieces of art of its time? The idea that Lucas, one of the most revolutionary and influential filmmakers of the 20th century, harkened back to the writing style of Shakespeare, considered quite possibly the best playwright of all time to compose dialogue which conveys the tragic themes of this story and its characters in a very direct yet moving way, because that's what you see in the opening to the final sequence of the film. Once Padme arrives to speak with Anakin, any great action scene in a movie has the emotions and story through usually dialogue to back it up. Otherwise, it can feel pointless and cheesy, like the droid factory scene from Attack of the Clones. If the scene isn't an important piece of the story, then it's probably not going to be a very worthwhile part of the movie. The prologue to the Anakin vs. Obi-Wan sequence consists of Padme arriving in her ship to meet her husband, who rushes out to embrace her, and it's tragic to see Vader, who is all out alone on the spire here, wearing a hood, feeling like he has done unimaginable things and has destroyed the galaxy and the lives within it for his own personal gain for power, all along here on a planet which truly is the embodiment of hell, but Padme is the one person he has left. We will soon see how that quickly changes, and after they hug, she tells him that Obi-Wan has announced Anakin's turn to the dark side to her. She also pleads with Anakin to come away with her to help raise their baby. This is almost like the last chance that Anakin has to turn away from the path that will lead to his mutilation, immolation, and being locked into the tomb of slavery to his master Darth Sidious for the rest of his life. Somehow, after the dark deeds he has committed, he is still offered another chance to repent for what he has done and turn away from causing more destruction, and you'd think he'd take it, right? Especially considering the whole reason he did this was to be with Padme and to not see her die in childbirth, but then, for one, He is still led by fear, not love, and still believes that only through his new Sith powers can he save her. So if he goes with her now before returning to his master for information, surely she will still die. But also in the attempts to save his wife, he has become so hungry for power that he now cares more about having control over the galaxy than saving her. When she says she doesn't know him anymore, and then Obi-Wan, who was a stowaway on board Padme's ship, stands in the doorway, Anakin lashes out in anger, calling Padme a liar and accusing her of attempted murder by bringing Obi-Wan. Then he force chokes her, only letting go at the last moment before his argument with his former master begins. To me, this verbal conflict between the two is arguably the best part of the sequence. We hear Hayden Christensen cutting into a pained cry as he accuses Obi-Wan of turning Padme against him.
You turned her against me!
We then see the jealousy from him at this somewhat insane idea that Obi-Wan could have been closer with Padme than he realized, and proves this by blocking the way to Padme for Obi-Wan, but then his obsession for power again takes root as he claims to have brought peace to his new empire. Obi-Wan is of course telling the truth here, and Anakin has been twisted by lies and emotions, but nonetheless, even Obi-Wan is arguably not all-knowing here, because if he truly understood the distrust the Council always showed Anakin, which isolated him from success as well as the situation he was in for preventing his wife from having the same fate as his mother, then he would perhaps be less aggressive here. This culminates with an inspiring quote from Obi-Wan where he says, "I will do what I must," and Anakin's reply of, "You will try." This not only makes you excited for the duel to come, which has been built up these past 4 minutes and arguably the whole trilogy, with us knowing Anakin has to be injured somehow, leading to great anticipation as to how this duel will end. And that's another aspect that makes it so great, is how already the idea of a fight between brothers, a fight between former master and apprentice, is very captivating and creates a high amount of drama, adding the anticipation for how it will end, knowing that one of the two characters has to be horrifically injured in order for the story to continue, makes the tension and stakes all the more high. Once we see that they're on a volcano planet that's being Mustafar, we can already guess how that could relate to Darth Vader's iconic breathing apparatus. One of the coolest aspects of this scene is how Anakin and Obi-Wan perfectly match each other in their moves. We can really tell that Obi-Wan has been training Anakin for the last 13 years, and the majority of the shots in this scene, including at the very beginning, are wide shots which allow us to see every single move from Nick Gillard's expert choreography. We can see from the making of books that he personally trained each of the main characters with large action roles, and also throughout all of the fight scenes and how they incorporated the characters to better their stories. There's such an epic, beautiful look to seeing the two Force users fighting on this dark platform with the hellish Mustafar in the background, with the glare from the gas giant Lefrani emitting a circle of light into an otherwise fiery scene. In my opinion, the most intense portion of this scene is when they go inside the Kleger Corp mining facility. Not only is the choreography on the same level as Obi-Wan vs. Maul in The Phantom Menace, but also Anakin attempts to use the same disarming move on Obi-Wan that he used on Dooku earlier in the movie, which Obi-Wan of course blocks, as almost every move that Anakin knows came from Obi-Wan's teachings. We then get another thing in a lightsaber fight which we had never seen before, which is them fighting in a narrow hallway with their lightsabers cutting into the walls around them, sending up a fray of sparks. The next minute or so has so many iconic moments that in my mind put this above anything we've ever seen or could be made, which brings me to another point, that even though I'm not the biggest fan of how George cut this scene to go back and forth with the duel between Yoda and Sidious, it's not necessarily a problem with the movie, but I do feel like it could have been even better if the Yoda and Sidious duel happens in its entirety, and then we get the Anakin vs. Obi-Wan duel, which happens in its entirety afterwards. But the transitions back to this scene are incredible. Rather than just cutting to some random wide shot in the middle of the fight, we get to see a camera angle which swings down, followed by a close-up of Vader choking Obi-Wan, up close right before they begin their spinning move, which I'll talk about more in a moment. then jumping onto the pipes, and finally a close-up of them on the leg of the facility, which will soon fall into a river of lava. I just think the transitions back and forth between these two scenes are absolutely incredible. Also, Anakin choking Obi-Wan is a great callback to Darth Vader's character in the original trilogy, where we have seen him choking Captain Antilles, which is seen here when he attempts to choke his own former master to death. Then here we get another interesting movement where Obi-Wan actually goes in to kill Anakin, who is on the ground momentarily defenseless. The Obi-Annie spin, how it has become to be known as, is truly the peak of all the fast-paced choreography we just witnessed, as they are matching their moves so flawlessly that for a brief moment, they weave their swords between each other without them even touching, from how closely they are mirroring each other at this point in combat. This concludes with, in my opinion, the best use of the Force theme in the entire saga, other than the binary sunset, because in 2005, this was the final piece of the puzzle in the story of Anakin Skywalker, the story of balance to the Force, and the story of the rise and fall of the Empire. This moment felt like the culmination of all of these, all with the tragic story of Anakin and Obi-Wan sitting at the midst of it all. Even though Anakin is definitely more powerful than Obi-Wan in the Force, it arguably makes sense that he would probably be more tired out from such a difficult opponent to go against in lightsaber combat, that being his own master, whereas Obi-Wan is used to going against foes of much greater power than him. Oh, and we get this moment of them slashing the panel here, which causes the shields on the mining leg to go out, now susceptible to eruptions from the surrounding volcanoes. I also love the part where they go out and we get to Duel of the Fates playing, reminding us of how this trilogy started off with another duel, which was the first one of this caliber. We somehow already raised the stakes yet again from two people we care deeply about, fighting to the death, both of who are proficient at taking out skilled Force users by adding in the danger from the surroundings of the lava planet. They leap onto these precarious pipes, which are then transitioned to one of the massive stalks of the facility, and we get this incredible shot, which is an encapsulation of this entire scene and sequence. Ever since I first saw this movie as a young child, this image has always stuck in my head as the most memorable from the scene. Also, it's such an intense idea to have two human beings fighting with a massive wave of lava rising up behind them. After this, we get to the one part of the fight which is the most criticized for the quote-unquote Tarzan section. However, like I said, seeing the environment being part of the threat in this scene is a good thing. Also, there's a difference between this scene and something like Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, because while that moment is during a scene of relatively little importance, that's being a random chase scene, but in Revenge of the Sith, we have the most climactic, serious final fight of the trilogy, and I feel like our suspension of disbelief is more flexible here because of how far into the story we are. Also, I'd argue that in a world like Star Wars, things like this are allowed to happen. I like how we get this brief moment where the two have to stop fighting and are momentarily focused on something other than killing each other when the arm of the facility starts to melt away. It would have been cool to see the moment of them fighting together against a massive creature on Mustafar, as was created in concept art for this scene. Also, when we get to the waterfall, or I guess this would technically be a lava fall, both of the characters almost die, especially Anakin, who doesn't manage to swing back onto the spire until the last moment and almost too late, and truly surviving such a situation is one that only the likes of the most skilled warriors in this world could perform. While the final bit of the fight is less dynamic than the rest of it, as the two characters are limited to floating platforms above a river of lava, this actually works out really good because we can then focus more on the dialogue and tension in this final stretch of Vader's origin and Anakin's downfall. Lucas did a great job keeping a good balance of dialogue and no dialogue in his duels, because before this moment, Anakin and Obi-Wan don't talk once to each other until now. That is, from once the duel actually starts. Obviously they argue before that. My favorite part is when Anakin says, "This is the end for you, my master." This whole scene, we've seen Obi-Wan desperately doing everything he possibly can to parry Vader's ruthless attacks, and at this point we start to worry that Obi-Wan, who is, generally speaking, in the right here, isn't going to survive, but then again, he is of course in the original trilogy, so that wouldn't make much sense, and this all ends with Obi-Wan leaping off of his repulsor lift platform onto a bank bordering the lava. He tells Anakin he has the high ground, but Anakin, in his hubris and pride, leaps up anyway, which ends the best fight scene in film history with a moment that doesn't glorify the violence and treat it like some victorious moment, but rather we see a brief glimpse of Obi-Wan slashing into Anakin with the sound of his lightsaber slashing and Vader collapsing to the dark shore below. While this is the end of the duel, I also covered the build up to this scene, so I'm going to cover the results of it as well. I haven't talked too much about John Williams so far, but in the argument between Anakin and Obi-Wan, we hear the song Anakin's Betrayal, which also plays during Order 66 and is personally one of my favorite Star Wars songs. Anakin versus Obi-Wan and then Battle of the Heroes, which generally get fused together in most people's minds, but Battle of the Heroes as a leitmotif is an exciting song that turns into epic and tragic as it goes along. My favorite parts are when they fight atop the pipes, and it has a very dark tragic undertone. And then also towards the end when we hear the full choir coming out, which is truly beautiful. The Immolation song is one of the most intensely tragic songs in modern history, and it shows the deep sadness and disbelief that Obi-Wan feels from seeing his best friend and practically younger brother betray him and their friends in the most evil way possible. Hayden Christensen lets out pure pain from his voice when he yells out, "I hate you!" But even though there's the moments of him glaring at Obi-Wan with Sith eyes, there are also parts where he cries in sadness and pain, showing regret for what he has done. Another cool fact about this scene is that we can actually see Anakin's eyes slowly turn from normal to Sith eyes, and Hayden's physical acting throughout this scene, as well as the rest of the movie in general, is enough to make all claims at him being a bad actor fraudulent. As the first PG-13 Star Wars movie, showing Anakin actually burning alive is so shocking and makes this brutal end to his story before his eventual revival all the more visceral and impactful. In conclusion, I feel that the Anakin versus Obi-Wan scene managed to convey a deeply tragic and emotional moment in one of the best character stories of all time in a way that broke the visual boundaries of anything that media or art had been able to show before this, to the point where the entire environment that the characters are in perfectly portrays the graveness and despair of this scene is truly an achievement of creative and technological mastery from Lucasfilm. They actually combined practical miniatures of the Mustafar background, with footage of Mount Etna erupting, and then of course digital extensions and lava to create an environment which feels very real and visceral. More so than 95% of the other locations in the prequel trilogy because of the real elements. But anyway, that's it for this video. You can subscribe if you want to. My advice for the week, Christian advice, is don't give up. Yeah, consider checking out the merch store if you want to. You can also leave a comment on this video if you had any questions or any video suggestions for future videos, or if you just want to tell me how your week has gone. But anyway, I upload normal videos every Friday at 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and I also post shorts every single day. But yeah, see ya.